Others used their alien girls for pleasure. Mine taught me what humanity meant. Asterisk the assignment. The cargo transport hummed through the void, carrying its precious and controversial cargo to the Outer Rim colonies. Lieutenant Commander Jonas Blackthorne sat in the pilot's chair, his weathered hands gripping the controls tighter than necessary. Behind him, in the sealed compartment, waited his assignment, one of the Zephyrian companions that had become the galaxy's most sought-after export. 3 years since the Zephyrian homeworld had fallen to economic collapse, their people scattered across human space as everything from laborers to other services. The companion program, as the bureaucrats called it, was supposedly humanitarian aid. Jonas knew better. It was exploitation wrapped in pretty words and legal contracts. His COMM unit crackled. Blackthorne base to Transport 7. You're cleared for landing Bay 12. Your package is expected in processing immediately upon arrival. Copy that, Control. Jonas replied, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Package, as if the being in his cargo hold was just another piece of equipment. The mining colony of Terminus stretched before them as they descended a collection of prefabricated domes and industrial complexes clinging to the surface of a dead world. Jonas had been stationed here for 6 months, watching human decency erode like the planet's atmosphere. The other officers bragged about their companions like trophies, reducing sentient beings to objects for their amusement. He'd requested no assignment. 3 times his requisition had been denied. Apparently, the brass thought everyone needed their morale enhancement package. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang. Jonas sat for a moment, staring at the sterile walls of the landing bay. Through the viewport, he could see other officers waiting with barely concealed anticipation for their own deliveries. The sight made him sick. Taking a deep breath, he moved to the cargo compartment and initiated the release sequence. The door hissed open, revealing a figure that made him forget to breathe. She was tall and graceful, with skin that shifted between deep blue and violet depending on the light. Her hair fell in silver waves past her shoulders, and her eyes held an intelligence that cut through his preconceptions like a blade. She wore the standard issue companion attire, minimal, designed for easy access, marking her as property, but her posture spoke of dignity. She stood like royalty, despite her circumstances. "I am Nyx Starweaver," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. "I assume you are my assigned partner." Jonas found himself struggling for words. He'd expected someone broken, defeated. Instead, she radiated quiet strength that made him feel ashamed of his own assumptions. "Lieutenant Commander Jonas Blackthorne," he managed, "and you're not my anything. You're a person, not property." Something flickered in her violet eyes, surprise, perhaps even hope. "That's unusual. Most humans see us as exotic playthings. Most humans are idiots," Jonas said, then caught himself. "Sorry. I didn't mean." "You're apologizing to me." Nyx tilted her head, studying him with new interest. When was the last time someone apologized to a Zephyrian? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Jonas realized he didn't know. The companion program had systematized the dehumanization, or rather, the depersonification of an entire species. They'd become objects, not individuals deserving of basic courtesy. "Come on," he said, turning away from the cargo bay. "I'll show you to your quarters, and for the record, they're your quarters, not whatever this program pretends they are." As they walked through the colony's corridors, Jonas noticed how other personnel stared at Nyx, some with barely concealed lust, others with the casual indifference reserved for equipment. But Nyx carried herself with unwavering dignity, her chin raised despite the whispers that followed in their wake. "Why are you different?" she asked quietly as they reached the residential sector. Jonas paused at his door, considering the question. "Maybe because I still remember what it feels like to be human." He didn't understand it yet, but those words would prove prophetic. In trying to preserve her dignity, he was about to rediscover his own humanity. Understanding quarters Jonas had prepared were Spartan, but clean, a single room with basic amenities and privacy screens he'd installed himself. Most importantly, they had a lock that worked from the inside. Nix examined everything with careful attention, her violet eyes taking in details he'd never considered significant. "You gave me a lock," she said, running her fingers over the mechanism. "Everyone deserves privacy. The others don't have locks." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "The other companions, I mean. I've accessed the colony's housing database. Standard companion quarters have external controls only." Jonas felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm not most people." "No," Nix agreed, settling onto the simple chair he'd provided. "You're not." Which raises questions about why you accepted assignment to the program at all. The directness of her question caught him off guard. He'd expected gratitude, perhaps wariness. Instead, she was interrogating him with the precision of a trained investigator. "I didn't have a choice," he said finally. "Command decided I needed social adjustment." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're the one who filed complaints about the treatment of Zephyrian workers in the mining operation." Jonas stared at her. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I'm not actually a companion." Nix stood, her posture shifting subtly. The submissive bearing fell away, replaced by something that reminded Jonas of his old commanding officers. A Nix Starweaver, former intelligence analyst for the Zephyrian Defense Corps. "I volunteered for this assignment." "Volunteered?" The word came out strangled. "My people are dying, Jonas, not just from poverty or displacement, but from hopelessness. The companion program is destroying us from within, convincing our young people that their only value lies in entertaining humans." She moved to the small window, gazing out at the mining complex. "Someone needs to document what's happening here. Someone needs to gather evidence." Jonas sank into the remaining chair, his worldview tilting. "You're a spy. I'm a witness." She turned back to him, her expression intense. "The question is, what are you going to do with this information?" Before he could answer, his comm unit buzzed. "Blackthorn, report to officers' lounge for evening social hour. Bring your companion." Jonas looked at the device with distaste. The evening social hours were barely disguised orgies where officers showed off their companions. Like expensive toys. "I don't attend those." "You do now," Nix said firmly. "If I'm going to gather intelligence on how this program actually operates, I need access." "Absolutely not." Jonas stood, his jaw set. "I won't parade you around like what I'm supposed to be." Nix moved closer, her violet eyes fierce. "Jonas, I appreciate your desire to protect me, but I didn't infiltrate this program to hide in comfortable quarters. I came here to save my people." The conviction in her voice stopped his protests cold. This wasn't a victim needing rescue, this was a soldier with a mission. "The other officers," he said slowly, "they'll expect me to treat you like property." "Yes." Nix reached out and touched his arm, her skin warm against his. "Can you do that? Can you pretend to be like them?" Jonas looked down at her hand on his arm, feeling something stir that had nothing to do with the physical contact. It was recognition, one person seeing another clearly, without pretense or expectation. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never been good at lying." "Then don't lie." Nix stepped back, but her eyes never left his. "Just be yourself, but quietly. Let them assume what they want to assume. Most people see what they expect to see." That evening, Jonas entered the officers' lounge with Nix at his side. She'd changed into one of the more revealing companion outfits, but somehow managed to wear it like armor rather than a uniform of subjugation. The other officers barely glanced at Jonas, their attention immediately drawn to Nix. "Blackthorn," called Captain Rodriguez, already well into his cups, "finally joined the civilized world, I see. Your Zephyrian's a beauty, where'd you get?" "Her standard assignment," Jonas replied tersely, his skin crawling at the casual objectification. As the evening progressed, Jonas watched in horrified fascination as Nix worked the room. She appeared to be playing the role of subservient companion, but Jonas could see her cataloging conversations, memorizing faces, gathering the intelligence she'd come for. What disturbed him most wasn't the other officer's behavior he'd expected. It was how natural this deception felt when he was with her, how right it seemed to protect her mission, even if it meant participating in a system he despised. Later, back in her quarters, Nix was quiet as she changed out of the companion outfit. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For not trying. To save me from myself." She looked at him with something like respect. Most humans think protection means control. Jonas realized he was beginning to understand the difference. Connection. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Jonas found himself looking forward to their conversations more than anything else in his routine. Nyx had a way of seeing through the colony's facade that both impressed and disturbed him. She'd identified corruption networks, abuse patterns, and systematic exploitation that he'd missed despite being stationed there for months. "Your species has a remarkable capacity for willful blindness," she observed one evening as they reviewed her intelligence reports together. They'd fallen into the habit of working side by side, her analytical mind complementing his tactical. "Training, it's not blindness," Jonas said, studying a pattern of resource allocation that clearly showed administrative theft. "It's self-preservation. Seeing problems means having to take responsibility for fixing them." Nyx looked up from her notes, violet eyes thoughtful. "Is that why you filed those complaints about worker conditions? Self-preservation, the opposite." Jonas leaned back in his chair, suddenly tired. "My father was a mining engineer. Spent his whole career fighting for safety regulations, better equipment, fair treatment. It got him blacklisted from every major operation in the core worlds, but he kept fighting. Until it killed him." The words came out harder than Jonas intended. "Heart attack at 45, brought on by stress and poverty. My mother always said he died trying to save people who didn't want to be saved." Nyx was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than he'd ever heard it. "You're afraid of becoming him. I'm afraid of failing like him." Jonas met her eyes, surprised by his own honesty. "Every time I see injustice and do nothing, I feel like I'm betraying everything he stood for. But every time I try to fight it, I remember how much good his principles did him in the end." "Perhaps the question isn't whether he succeeded or failed," Nyx said slowly. "Perhaps it's whether the world is better because he tried." Before Jonas could respond, his comm unit buzzed with an emergency signal. The message that appeared made his blood run cold. "Disciplinary review scheduled for Lieutenant. Commander Blackthorn. Report to Administrative Complex tomorrow, 0800 hours. Bring companion for evaluation." Nyx read the message over his shoulder. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's been asking questions about my behavior." Jonas stood, pacing the small room. "Companion evaluations they test the relationship dynamic. Make sure the officer is properly utilizing their assignment." "Utilizing?" Nyx's voice went flat. "They want to verify that you're using me for sexual purposes, among other things." Jonas couldn't meet her eyes. "They'll interview us separately, run physiological scans, check for evidence of regular intimate contact." "I see." Nyx moved to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the dark glass. "And if we fail this evaluation, you'll be reassigned to someone who will utilize you properly. I'll be disciplined for failing to adapt to colony life." "Reassignment to whom?" Jonas thought of Captain Rodriguez and his casual cruelty, of Lieutenant Morrison who collected companions like trophies. "Someone worse." Nyx turned from the window, her expression resolved. "Then we don't fail. NYX. You don't understand what you're suggesting." "I understand perfectly." She moved closer, her violet eyes intense. "I understand that failing this evaluation destroys both our missions. Mine to save my people, yours to maintain your integrity in an impossible situation. I won't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm choosing." She reached out and took his hands, her skin warm against his. "Jonas, look at me." He did, and saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. "Over these past weeks, working with you, talking with you, this hasn't felt like an assignment." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's felt like partnership, like friendship, maybe something more." "Nyx, I know the situation is impossible. I know we come from different worlds, literally and figuratively. But when I'm with you, I forget that I'm supposed to be property. I forget that you're supposed to be my owner. I just feel like myself." Jonas stared at their joined hands, his mind reeling. Somewhere along the way, his protective instincts had evolved into something deeper. The woman standing before him wasn't just a mission or a responsibility. She was someone he'd begun to care about. in ways that terrified him. "If we do this," he said slowly, "if we cross that line, there's no going back." "Perhaps," Nick said, stepping closer. "Going back isn't what either of us really wants." When she kissed him, it wasn't the desperate coupling of the officer's lounge or the mechanical transaction the program intended. It was something else entirely: recognition, choice, and the fragile beginning of something that had nothing to do with assignments or duty. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Jonas realized that for the first time since arriving at Terminus, he felt fully human. Revelation's disciplinary review was conducted in the colony's sterile administrative complex by Commander Patricia Wells, a woman whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by her complete lack of empathy. She sat behind a metal desk. Nix and Jonas positioned in uncomfortable chairs across from her like defendants awaiting judgment. "Lieutenant Commander Blackthorne," Wells began, her voice carrying the flat efficiency of a medical scanner, "your integration metrics show concerning anomalies. Your companion requisition was delayed multiple times, and your participation in colony social activities remains minimal." "I prefer to keep my personal life private, Commander," Jonas replied carefully. "Privacy is a luxury we cannot afford in deep space operations." Wells turned her attention to Nix, her gaze calculating. "Designation ALTA for 7. You've been assigned to this officer for 23 days. Report on your primary functions." Nix straightened in her chair, and Jonas held his breath. They'd prepared for this moment, but the reality of watching her reduce herself to program parameters made his skin crawl. "I provide emotional support, domestic assistance, and physical companionship as required," Nix said, her voice perfectly modulated to sound submissive while her eyes remained defiant. "Physical companionship frequency, daily intimate contact, as appropriate to the officer's needs." The lie came so smoothly that Jonas almost believed it himself. They'd spent the previous night creating evidence of their supposed relationship disrupted. Bed linens, hormonal traces that would satisfy medical scans, the physical markers that the program looked for. Satisfaction rating with assigned officer: optimal. Lieutenant Commander Blackthorne treats me appropriately. Wells made notes on her tablet, her expression unchanged. "Officer Blackthorne, do you have any complaints about your companion's performance?" "None," Jonas said firmly. "She exceeds all program specifications, and her integration into your daily routine, complete." Jonas reached over and took Nix's hand, the gesture looking possessive to outside observation, but feeling like an anchor. To him, "She's become essential to my well-being." "I see." Wells set down her tablet and leaned back. "Then you won't mind demonstrating your relationship dynamic?" "I'm sorry?" "Physical interaction. Now, I need to verify that your connection is genuine rather than fabricated for my benefit." Jonas felt his blood turn to ice. Beside him, Nix tensed almost imperceptibly. This hadn't been part of their preparation. "Commander, I hardly think that's necessary." "I disagree." Wells' smile was predatory. "The program exists to ensure proper utilization of resources. If you're not actually engaging with your companion as intended, she needs to be reassigned to someone who will." "You want us to," Jonas couldn't finish the sentence. "I want verification that this relationship is real." "Touch her. Show me how you interact when no one's watching." The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Jonas looked at Nix, seeing his own conflict reflected in her violet eyes. They'd crossed this line privately, by choice, for themselves. Being forced to perform it felt like violation. Nix made the decision for both of them. She stood and moved to Jonas's chair, settling onto his lap with fluid grace. To Wells, it probably looked like trained submission. Jonas knew better. He could see the slight tremor in her hands, the tension in her shoulders. "Like this?" Nix asked, her voice carrying just the right note of eager compliance. "Better, Officer Blackthorne. Your response seems restrained." Jonas understood the trap they were in, showed a little affection, and Wells would conclude the relationship was fake, show too much genuine emotion, and she might realize that what existed between them went far beyond program parameters. He wrapped his arms around Nix, pulling her closer. Her skin was warm against his, her scent familiar and comforting, but under Wells' calculating stare, even this simple intimacy felt corrupted. "Tell me about her," Wells commanded. "What makes this particular companion valuable to you?" Jonas looked into Nix's eyes, seeing layers of meaning behind her steady gaze. "She's intelligent," he said quietly. "She challenges me to think differently. She makes me want to be better than I am." Interesting. Most officers prefer more compliant attributes. I'm not most officers. No, you're not. Wells stood, moving around the desk like a predator circling prey. "Which brings me to the real purpose of this review. Your companion isn't registered in our standard acquisition databases. Her profile shows irregularities that suggest alternative origins." Nix went rigid in Jonas's arms, but her voice remained steady. "I don't understand. Your linguistic patterns, your behavioral responses, your intellectual capacity, they're all consistent with military training, rather than companion conditioning." Wells stopped directly in front of them. "Would you care to explain that discrepancy?" The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Jonas could feel Nix's heartbeat accelerating against his chest, could sense her mind racing for an escape route that didn't exist. "Some companions receive enhanced education packages," Nix said carefully, "to better serve officers with specific requirements. Enhanced education that includes tactical analysis and intelligence gathering protocols." Jonas felt the world tilt. Wells knew, somehow, she'd figured out exactly what Nix was doing here. "I think," Wells continued, her smile sharp as a blade, "we need to have a much more detailed conversation about your real purpose on this colony. Designation AL-47, or should I say, Agent Starweaver." The trap had been sprung, and they were both caught in it. Liberation, the holding cell in the colony's security complex, was a stark cube of metal and energy barriers. Jonas paced the small space while Nix sat perfectly still on the narrow bench, her violet eyes closed in meditation. They'd been separated for interrogation, then reunited here while Commander Wells decided their fate. "I should have seen it coming," Jonas muttered, his hands clenched into fists. The timing was too convenient, the questions too specific. "Stop," Nix's voice cut through his self-recrimination. "This isn't your fault, isn't it? I'm the one who brought you to that social hour. I'm the one who couldn't play their game convincingly enough." "Jonas," she opened her eyes, pinning him with her steady gaze. "Look at me." He stopped pacing, meeting her eyes despite the guilt churning in his stomach. "You couldn't play their game because you're not like them. That's not a failure, it's what makes you worth saving." "Worth saving?" Jonas laughed bitterly. "We're both facing court-martial at best, execution at worst. My inability to be what they wanted has destroyed us both, has it?" Nix stood, moving to the energy barrier that separated them from the corridor. "Or has it revealed something more important?" Before Jonas could ask what she meant, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Commander Wells appeared, flanked by two security officers, her expression triumphant. "Agent Starweaver," she said, keying open the cell door. "Your intelligence operation ends here." "What intelligence operation?" Nix asked mildly. "I'm a companion, assigned to provide services to Lieutenant Commander Blackthorne. Please, we've analyzed your behavior patterns, your knowledge base, your interaction protocols, your Zephyrian intelligence, sent to gather information on the companion program." Wells stepped into the cell, her confidence absolute. "The question is, what were you planning to do with that information?" "Nothing," Nix said simply. "Because there's nothing to gather. Your program operates exactly as advertised. Humans acquire Zephyrian companions for personal use. Where's the conspiracy in that?" Wells' smile faltered slightly. "Your reports." "What reports?" "I've sent no communications off-world. I've accessed no classified systems. I've done nothing but serve my assigned role." Nix's voice remained perfectly calm, but Jonas could see the steel beneath her composure. "Unless you're suggesting that simply being intelligent while Zephyrian constitutes espionage, your relationship with Officer Blackthorne is exactly what the program intended. He utilizes my services. I provide them, as you verified in your examination." Jonas watched the exchange with growing understanding. Nix was boxing Wells into a corner using the program's own parameters against it. If Wells admitted that their relationship was more than utilitarian, She'd be acknowledging that the program could produce genuine human-alien connection, something that would undermine its entire premise. However, Nyx continued, her tone shifting slightly. Your investigation has raised some interesting questions about program oversight. Tell me, Commander, how many other companions have you subjected to this level of scrutiny? That's not relevant, isn't it? Because if you're only investigating Zephyrian companions who demonstrate intelligence and independence, that suggests a concerning bias in your enforcement protocols. Nyx stepped closer to Wells, her posture no longer submissive but commanding. It suggests that the program's true purpose isn't companion services at all, but systematic suppression of Zephyrian autonomy. Wells' face flushed red. You're twisting the situation, am I? Then perhaps we should discuss this with your superiors. I'm sure they'd be interested to know that colony commanders are conducting unauthorized interrogations of program participants based purely on species-based suspicion. The security officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Jonas realized what Nyx was doing. She was turning the investigation back on Wells herself. Furthermore, Nyx pressed, your demand that we perform intimate acts for your observation constitutes a violation of at least 7 different regulations regarding the treatment of sentient beings. That's assuming, of course, that you consider Zephyrians sentient. Of course Wells stopped, recognizing the trap. Excellent. Then you'll have no problem explaining to a formal review board why you felt it necessary to force sentient beings to perform sexual acts for your entertainment. The silence that followed was deafening. Wells stared at Nyx, her triumph dissolving into the realization that she'd been outmaneuvered by someone she'd dismissed as property. You're free to go, Wells said finally, her voice tight with suppressed rage. Both of you. But don't think this is over. No, Nyx agreed, stepping out of the cell with fluid grace. I don't think it is. Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Jonas watched Nyx transmit a detailed report to coordinates he didn't recognize. The communication contained everything she'd observed during her time on the colony, every abuse, every violation, every systematic dehumanization she'd witnessed. So you were a spy, he said. I was a witness, she corrected. And now my people have everything they need to challenge the companion program in the Galactic courts. What happens now? Nyx turned from the communication console, her violet eyes bright with possibilities. Now we decide what we want to be. The program won't survive the legal challenge. It's built on too many violations of sentient rights, which means companions like me will be free to choose our own paths. And what path do you choose? She moved to him, taking his hands in hers. I choose the one where I don't have to pretend to be property, where you don't have to pretend to own me, where we can simply be to people who found something real in an impossible situation. Jonas pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Others use their alien girls for pleasure, he said quietly. You taught me what humanity meant, and you, Nyx replied, her voice warm with affection, taught me that some humans are worth believing in. Outside their window, the red forest of Terminus swayed in the alien wind, but for the first time since arriving at the colony, Jonas felt like he was home. The end.